God can use the hands of lawless men to accomplish his holy purposes. In Isaiah 10, God is talking about how he's going to use Assyria to punish Israel. Israel is chasing after idols, and so God is going to punish Israel, and he's going to use the Assyrians to do it. Now, the Assyrians themselves are godless, and their intent in punishing Israel is not to serve as the Lord's rod of discipline. In their haughtiness, they think that they're just more powerful than the Israelites and, in fact, than the God of Israel. And so they're doing this for their own malevolent ends. And so God, when he says that he's going to use them like a rod, the verse in verse 5, it literally says, "Woe to Assyria, the rod of my anger." So in the same breath that God says he's going to use Assyria like a rod, he says, "Woe to Assyria," because God's going to judge Assyria for what Assyria is doing, even though God is using Assyria's own wicked intentions to accomplish his holy ends. And even though this is something that's past, it teaches us something about God and about how God acts in history. God can use the hands of lawless men to accomplish his holy purposes. Isn't that what happened on the cross? Isn't that exactly what Peter says in Acts 2 and Acts 4? You, by the hands of lawless men, put him to death. But he says that this happened according to the predeterminate plan and foreknowledge of God. So God used the wicked intentions of the religious leaders to crucify Christ. It was the Lord's will to crush him, Isaiah 53. It was God's will to do this. It was his plan. So this teaches us something of how God acts in history. And so it also teaches us something about God's character, that God is holy, and if his people sin, he'll punish them. But also shows us that God hates idolatry. Eventually, Israel, according to Jesus in the New Testament, Jesus says that the kingdom's going to be taken away from you and given to a people that'll bring forth the fruits of it. Eventually, the sorts of things that brought God's wrath on Israel through the Assyrians would terminate in God destroying Israel, Jerusalem, and the temple, and carting them off into the nations. Now, why is that interesting? Well, one reason it's interesting to me is sometimes Muslims believe that their apparent success is proof that they are serving God. Right? Muslims will often point to the fact that Islam rapidly conquered the Middle East, right? And even since then has grown. So they point to the rapid spread of Islam and the wideness, right? The scope of Islam. The way this normally comes out is simply saying it's the fastest growing religion. And my usual retort is, yeah, gangrene spreads rapidly too. I don't think anybody wants gangrene, right? But Muslims look at their success militarily by means of the sword and so forth as though it were a proof that they have God's approval. But so did the Assyrians, right? The Assyrians looked at their success and they used it to vaunt themselves and their idols over against the true God of Israel, right? Not the idols that the Israelites were worshiping. But Isaiah 10 teaches us otherwise. God can use a pagan nation. God can use pagans like Muslims to punish those who profess God's name if they give themselves over to idolatry. So what is it that happened in history? What is it? Who is it that most suffered at the hands of the pagan Arabs, the pagan Muslims? Who is it? What lands were they that were largely conquered and swept up by the Islamic hordes? It was the lands of Eastern Christendom that had given themselves over to idolatry. They had given themselves over to idolatry, and Muslims are nothing if not implacably anti-idols. God took this pagan group of people and used it to his own holy ends. He used Muslims like a rod across the back of those idolaters. They should have learned their lesson, but they didn't.
So Islam engulfed the churches of the Orthodox Church in the East, the Church of Jerusalem, the Church of Antioch, the Church of Alexandria, and eventually the Church of Constantinople, and in the Balkans, all fell under the yoke of Islam.